I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Authors at Google event. We have George Saunders here today. George is the author of several collections of short stories and a book for children. His first collection of essays is the one that you have in your hands, The Braindead Megaphone, and it was published last week. Saunders has been compared to an impressive array of authors and humorists that I'm going to try to list for you. And they include Kurt Vonnegut, Thomas Pynchon, Flannery O'Connor, Matt Groening, and Mark Twain. In The Braindead Megaphone, he covers topics as familiar as U.S. immigration policies and media, and as otherworldly as the Buddha Boy of Nepal and luxurious hotels in Dubai, all with his trademark wit, honesty, and sharp sense of right and wrong. His writing is satirical and seriously funny, but it's also been called redemptive. Saunders exposes the absurdity of life as we know it, while simultaneously exhibiting a sincere belief in, and perhaps hope for, the goodness of mankind. He currently teaches creative writing at Syracuse University, and in 2006, he was awarded the Macarthur Foundation Genius Grant. Please join me in welcoming George Saunders.
Thank you very much for coming here. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate it. I always worry about these events because it's that initial sort of public nervousness and about whether people will laugh or not. So I have a funny piece that I could start with, but I also have, in my bag, I have an alternate in case this is a more serious event. It's kind of just, I'm really proud of it. It's kind of a short, it's not that short, it's a kind of a lengthy history of the legume in American agriculture. So if I start to read this and no one laughs, I'll just go with the legumes. So basically I'm asking you to tell me your feelings by laughing or not. But the beans are very interesting. I think you'd like it. So anyway, this is kind of a, first of all, I apologize in advance for this cough. I'm trying to emulate my hero, Anton Chekhov, so I've got TB. This is a piece, more serious piece actually, that talks about my feelings as I go into midlife. I'm now 80, and I've noticed that, if the brain could be said to have a sphincter, mine is tightening up a little bit. And so this piece is called Nostalgia. The other day I was watching TV and it occurred to me that I've become a prude. The show in question was innocuous enough, nothing shocking really, just an episode of Hottie Leader, featuring computer simulations of what various female world leaders would look like naked and in the throes of orgasm. But somehow between that and the Pizza Hut commercial where Paris Hilton and Jessica Simpson engage in some girl-on-girl action in a vast field of pizza sauce, something snapped. I mean, I know what the problem is. I'm old. I came of age in a simpler sexual time. Back in those ancient prelapsarian days, girl-on-girl hadn't even been invented yet. At that time, girl-on-guy had only recently been invented. I remember my parents and their neighbors standing in the yard with a pair of crude human figures made of wood, trying to work out all the details. Sometimes a couple would get all worked up and forget where things were supposed to go, and the husband would have to call a friend. Only phones were new, too, so you'd go over to visit a friend from school, and there'd be his dad, just standing there naked, phone in hand, totally flummoxed. Women could get pregnant from merely watching a kiss in a movie. Girls, or at least the good girls, would go to movies blindfolded. I remember once in 4th grade, I had to get engaged to a girl whose coat I'd brushed up against in the cloakroom. Those are simpler times, but in some ways, I think, better times. Same deal with violence. I remember how shocked we all were when the whole Cain and Abel thing happened. What? We kept saying he bludgeoned his brother with a rock? I remember the first time a severed limb was ever shown on TV. People were running out of their houses screaming. And it was just a fake leg in a cartoon. Imagine how shocked those screaming people would be now when, for example, you can log on to the Evidence of Evil website and they'll send you a box full of bloody prosthetics, which you reassemble into a crack-addicted whore, who will then emit some clues through her computerized voice box. And when you think you know who murdered her, you enter the name of the killer on the website, and if you're right, you get to see a short porn of her, making love with her killer, moments before he hacks her to bits, while she has a flashback of her mother beating her with a chair leg. I mean, okay, there was violence when I was a kid, but nobody really talked about it. If you got strangled and dismembered, you just got up the next day, whistling a happy tune, and went down and did some riveting for the war effort. As far as computer simulations, sorry, no. All we had was sketch pads and pencils. If we wanted to see what various female world leaders looked like naked in the throes of orgasm, we had to use a little thing called the imagination. Plus, all the world leaders were men back then. And believe me, once you've drawn Richard Nixon naked and in the throes of orgasm, you never have quite the same interest in using your imagination again. And every time you even see a pencil, you get a little pukey and have to go sit down. You know, whenever I talk to a young person, like some of the teenagers in my neighborhood, or this one toddler, Maxie, or even a couple of fetuses I run into occasionally, I say to them, trust me, guys, enjoy your youth, because the level of sex and violence is going to continue to escalate, and by the time you're my age, the world of your youth will seem like a distant, innocent paradise. Well, the teenagers and the toddler, Maxie, sometimes they seem to get it, but the fetuses, well, you know fetuses. They're arrogant. To them, it's always going to be a soft, gentle ride in a warm, comfortable space. And I'm like, okay, smart guy, call me in 9 months and we'll talk. Or I will. You'll just be lying there pink and newborn with a terrified look on your face, apologizing to me with those little shocked eyes. Things just keep getting worse. I suspect that in 40 years, when I'm 87, I'll look back at the present level of sex and violence and just go, oh man, you called that sex and violence? That was nothing. That was Puritanism. That was pacifism compared to now. But then I'll have to go because it'll be stripper night at the old folks' home, and I'll have to find my costume and my back brace. But on the way there, I'll be killed by a mysterious old folks' home invader who actually works for Fox and is committing and filming my murder for later broadcast on When Codgers on Their Way to Strip Look Terrified. Same with music, though, right? I used to love music, back when it had melody and chords and lyrics. But now it has no melody and no chords, just thwacking, and they even seem to be cutting back on the thwacking, so now it's sometimes just thwack. As far as lyrics, do you consider these lyrics? Hump, my stumpy, lumpy hump. Hump my dump, you lumpy, slumpy dump. I'll dump your hump and then just hump your dump? You lumpy, frumply clump? I'm sorry, to me, those are not lyrics. In my day, lyrics were used to express real emotion, like the emotion of being totally stoned. And trying to talk this totally stoned chick into sleeping with you in the name of love, which lasted forever if only you held on to your dreams. These kids today, I don't know what they believe. I mean, I don't even know what I believe anymore, but what I do not believe is that watching Paris Hilton and Jessica Simpson roll around in pizza sauce is helping our youth as they go forth and try to figure out what they believe. Scientific evidence suggests that even the fetuses inside of mothers watching that commercial are getting, 1, dumber, and two, little baby boners. I don't go for that. I think that when a fetus is in the womb, it should just be floating around with its undersized, arrogant head empty and its little nascent penis just, inactive. We grow these kids up too fast, and next thing you know, out come the Indian and the Chinese fetuses, and they start taking away the jobs of our homeland fetuses. And why? Because the foreign fetuses aren't jaded. They're innocent like I was, like my whole generation was when we were fetuses. Back in those long-forgotten idyllic days when American fetuses walked the earth like happy, unsoiled giants, doing algebra and reading the classics. There's a little more, but it's much more disgusting, so I'll just pause there for a second. So that's kind of a funnier piece, theoretically. How's everybody? Everybody okay? All right. So I thought I'd read a little bit of, just a short bit from this piece about Dubai. I was fortunate enough, a few years ago, GQ approached me and asked if I would do some journalism for them. And never done it before. And because my short stories are kind of like, they're set in these futuristic dystopias where the haves are beating up the have-nots in these disgusting artificial environments, they said, hey, Dubai, that would be perfect for you. So they were very sweet, and they sent me to do this big piece with no audition or anything. And of course, as is often the case, I think, excuse me, you're, before you go on a trip like that, as a writer, you're anxious because you don't want to screw it up. and you don't have to give them money back and so on. And so for a writer, and I suppose for any creative person, the anxiety takes the form of massive conceptualizing on the front end, right? You want to know exactly what you're going to do before you actually do the trip. So for me, the thrill was to have this sort of package story, haves, have-nots, and all the thing, and then go there and see the way it's disrupted in reality. So one of the kind of mini themes that runs through this book is this idea that to the extent that we can imagine the world, we always imagine it smaller than it actually is. So when we imagine the world small and then act boldly, we often make terrible mistakes. And in my, my view, that's a perfect description of the run-up to the war in Iraq, was incomplete conceptualization of a place and then too bold action into that place. But anyway, Dubai was a smaller, kind of more silly version of that experience. So this first section is called Put That Stately Pleasure Palace There Between Those Other Two. If you're like I was before I went to Dubai, you may not know exactly where Dubai is. Near Venezuela? No. Sorry, that's incorrect. Somewhere north of Pakistan, an idyllic mountain kingdom ruled by gentle goat herds? No. Dubai actually is in the UAE on the Arabian Peninsula, 100 miles across the Gulf from Iran, about 600 miles from Basra, 1,100 from Kabul. You might also not know, as I didn't know, what Dubai is all about or why someone would want to send you there. You might wonder, is it dangerous? Will I be beheaded? Will I need a translator? Will my translator be beheaded? Just before we're beheaded, will my translator try to get out of it by blaming everything on me? But no, not to worry. Dubai, turns out, is quite possibly the safest great city in the world. It's also the newest great city in the world. In the 1950s, before oil was discovered there, Dubai was just a cluster of mud huts and Bedouin tents along Dubai Creek. The entire city has basically been built in the last 50 years. And actually, the cool parts, the parts that have won Dubai its reputation as the Vegas of the Middle East, or the Venice of the Middle East, or the Disney World of the Middle East, if Disney World were the size of San Francisco and out in the desert, have been built in the last 10 years. And the super cool parts, the parts that when someone tells you about them, your attention drifts because these morons have to be lying. No one dreams this big or has that much available capital. Those parts are all going to be built in the next 5 years. So by 2010, if all goes according to plan, Dubai will have the world's tallest skyscraper, largest mall, biggest theme park, longest indoor ski run, most luxurious underwater hotel accessible by submarine train, a huge 60,000 resident development called International City, divided into nation neighborhoods, England, China, France, etc., within which all homes will be required to reflect the national architectural style, not to mention 4 artificially constructed island mega archipelagos, 3 shaped like giant palm trees, the 4th like a map of the world, built using a specially designed boat that dredges up tons of ocean-bottom sand each day and sprays it into place. Before I saw Dubai for myself, I assumed this was all bluster. Brag about 10 upcoming projects, finally build one smaller than you'd bragged, hope everyone forgets about the other 9. But no, I've been to Dubai and I believe. If America was looking for a pluralistic, tax-free, laissez-faire, diverse, inclusive, tolerant, no-holds-barred, daringly capitalist country to serve as a shining city on the hill for the entire Middle East, we should have left Iraq alone and sponsored a national peaceful tourist excursion to Dubai and spent our 90 quadrillion Iraq war dollars there. Maybe. And this section is called, well, this is called the Wild Wadi Epiphany. And I stayed in this hotel called the Madinat Jamira, which didn't exist 2 years ago. It was just desert. And they built this incredibly beautiful Arabian village, complete with all these fake creeks that have these abras that are rowed by what I can only describe as fake Arabs because they're all from Nepal, but they're wearing Arabic clothing. And so it's crazy. And of course, your first reaction is, ooh, how Vegas, you know. And then after a couple of days, you're like, I am not leaving. I love it here. It was so lush and, the wildflowers and just simulated wind towers and just a gorgeous artificial environment that's actually more platonically beautiful than any real environment could ever be. So I got a little seduced by this. But finally, I did leave the green zone there and went to an even greener zone. This is called the Wild Wadi Epiphany. A short complimentary golf cart ride down the beach from the Madnat is Wild Wadi, a sprawling themed water park whose theme is, "A wadi is flooding." Once an hour, the sound of thunder, cracking trees, rushing waves blares through the facility-wide PA, and a waterfall begins dropping 1,000 gallons of water a minute into an empty pond, which then violently overflows down the pedestrian walkways past the gift shop. Waiting in line, I'm part of a sort of United Nations of partial nudity. Me, a couple of sunburned German girls, 3 angry-looking Arab teenagers, kind of like the Marx Brothers, if the Marx Brothers were Arabs, in bathing suits with cigarettes behind their ears, who I notice are muttering to one another while glowering. Then I see what they're muttering and glowering about. Several, like 15 members of the U.S. Navy on shore leave. You can tell they're Navy because they're huge and tattooed and innocently happy and keep bellowing things like, "Dude, fuck that, I'm all about dancing." While punching each other lovingly in the tattoos and shooting what I recognize as rural smiles of shyness and apprehension at all the people staring at them because they're so freaking loud. Then the Navy guys notice the glowering, muttering Arabs, and it gets weirdly tense there in line. Luckily, Luckily, it's my turn to awkwardly blop into my tube, and off I go. The ride involves a series of tremendous water jets that blast you on your tube gradually to the top of Wild Wadi, where your recently purchased swim trunks having been driven up your rear by the jets. You pause, looking out over the entire city, the miles of stone-white villas, the Burj Al Arab Hotel, sail-shaped, iconic, the world's only 7-star hotel, even though the rating system only goes up to 5, out in the green-blue bay, just before you fly down so fast that you momentarily fear the next morning's headline will read, "Middle-aged American dies in freak waterslide mishap. Bathing suit found far up ass." Afterward, I reconvene with my former line mates in a sort of faux river bend. Becalmed, traffic jammed, we bob around in our tubes, trying to keep off one another via impotent little hand flips, bare feet accidentally touching, oh, whoa, sorry, legs splayed, belly up in the blinding 112-degree Arabian sun, self-conscious and expectant, as in, are we, stuck here? Will we go soon? I hope I'm not the one who drifts under that dang waterfall over there. No one's glowering or muttering now. We're sated, enjoying that little dopey buzz of quasi-accomplishment you feel after a surprisingly intense theme park ride. One of the Arab kids, the one with the Chico hair, passes a drenched cigarette to me to pass to his friend, and then a lighter, and suddenly everybody's smiling. Me, the Arab Marxes, the sunburned German girls, the U.S. Navy. A disclaimer. It may be that when you're 46 and pearl white and wearing a new bathing suit at a theme park, on your first full day in Arabia, you're especially prone to big, naive philosophical realizations. Be that as it may, in my tube at Wild Wadi, I have a mini epiphany. Given enough time, I realize, statistically, despite what it may look like at any given moment, we will all be brothers. All differences will be bred out. There will be no pure Arab, no pure Jew, no pure American. The old dividers, nation, race, religion, will be overpowered by crossbreeding and by our mass media, our world culture enjoyment. Look what just happened here. Hatred and tension were diffused by sudden fun. Still bobbing around, 3 days before the resort bombings in Cairo, 2 weeks after the London bombings, I mumble a little prayer for the great homogenizing effect of pop culture. Same us out, Lord MTV. Even if in the process we're left a little dumber, please proceed. Let us, brothers and sisters, leave the intolerant, the ideologues, the religious Islamist Bolsheviks, our own solvers of problems with troops behind, fully clothed on the banks of Wild Wadi. We, the new people, desire fun and the good things of life, and through fun, we will be saved. Then the logjam breaks and we surge forward down a mini waterfall. Without exception, regardless of nationality, each of us makes the same sound as we disappear, a thrilled little self-forgetting whoop. And let me just read one more section from this. And then this is called Cleaning Among the Mayhem. Dubai is a city of people who come from elsewhere and are going back there soon. To start a good conversation with a fellow tourist, with the help, with just about anybody, simply ask, where are you from? Everyone wants to tell you. If white, they're usually from England, South Africa, or Ukraine. If not, they're from Sri Lanka, the Philippines, Kenya, Nepal, or India. One hotel seems to hire only Nepalese. One bar has only Ukrainians. You discover a pocket of Sri Lankan golf cart drivers, all anxious to talk about the tsunami. One day, inexplicably, everyone you meet, everywhere you go, is from the Philippines. Where are you from, you say all day, and all day people brightly answer, Philippines. That night, at a club called Boudoir, I meet L, an employee of Ford in Dubai, a manic, funny, Stanley Tucci-looking guy from Detroit, who welcomes me into his party, gets me free champagne, mourns the circa 1990 state of inner-city Detroit, feral dogs roaming the streets, trees growing out of upper stories of skyscrapers where, you know, formerly commerce was being done. The real 1960s automobile fucking world-class commerce, man. The night kind of explodes. I think this is the repressive Arabian Peninsula? Apparently, anything is permitted as long as it stays within the space within which it's permitted. Here's a Palestinian who lives in LA and his t-shirt says, LAPD, where everybody is king. A couple of blonde Russian girls dance on a rail among balloons. On the dance floor, two other blondes dance alone. A guy comes up behind one and starts passionately grinding her. This goes on a while. Then he stops, introduces himself. She shakes his hand. He goes back to grinding her. His friend comes up, starts grinding her friend. I don't get it. Prostitutes? Some new youthful social code? I am possibly too old to be in here? The dance floor is packed. The whole place becomes a dance floor. The rails are now packed with dancers. A Lebanese kid petulantly shouts that if this was fucking Beirut, the girls would be stripped off by now. Then gives me a snotty look and stomps away as if it's my fault the girls are still dressed. I drop my wallet, look down, and see the tiniest little woman imaginable, with a whisk broom, struggling against the surge of the crowd like some kind of cursed cleaning fairy, trying to find a small swath of floor to sweep while being bashed by this teeming mass of gyrating international hipsters. She's tiny, I mean tiny, like 3 feet tall, her head barely reaching all the gyrating waists, with thick glasses and bowl-cut hair. Dear little person. It seems impossible she's trying to sweep the dance floor at a time like this. She seems uncommonly, heroically dedicated, like some kind of OCD janitor on the Titanic. Where are you from? I shout. Philippines, she shouts, and goes back to her sweeping. So I'll pause there, and we can talk a little bit if you like. So, thank you. Thanks.
I have a microphone, so whoever has a question, let me know, and I'll give it to you.
Don't be shy. State capitals are fine.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Not bad. So it seems that you were talking about kind of two parallel themes in those two passages, and they seem contradictory to me, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. One kind of spoke about how pop culture is kind of making us worse off, and, you know, dumber and, you know, kind of just more kind of zombie-ish in a sense.
Right.
And the other one's kind of like how pop culture is our savior.
Right.
And it'll bring us together. So my question is, does it bring us together by just turning us all into zombies, kind of?
You know,
and what does that say about hatred also? That is hatred, in a sense, an enlightened state to some extent?
Yeah, I don't God, I hope not. But you know what I think? I'll tell you a story in response to a very intelligent question. There's this thing that happened. It's actually, it's in Gorky, the Russian writer Gorky, his notebooks. And he tells about being with Tolstoy in Moscow. And at this point, Tolstoy is like 190 years old and has just declared himself celibate, you know, and he's very righteous. So they're walking down the street, and these hussars come towards him, kind of the Russian Green Beret, basically, you know, these young swaggering guys. And Tolstoy says, that's what's wrong with Russia. These young men, they believe only in power and aggression, obliterating the rights of others. That will be the downfall of our nation. And Gorky's like, wow, I never thought of it that way. It's brilliant. And so then these guys walk by on either side of the two writers, and little Tolstoy turns on his heel and he says, on the other hand, that's everything that's great about Russia. The confidence, the urge to action, the idea that life can be ours, we can change it. So Gorky stops there, but my assumption is that what he's saying is a very deep sort of thing, which is in art, and maybe just in general, the idea is to be able to be really comfortable with contradictory ideas. In other words, wisdom might be seen to be two contradictory ideas, both expressed at their highest level, and just let to sit in the same cage, sort of vibrating, you know. So I think as a writer, I'm really never sure of what I really believe. But some things I know are true and I write them. I'm paraphrasing Dylan here. Some things I know are true and I write them. Some things I know are false and I write them. And some things I'm not sure and I write them. And the idea, I think, is that in honestly confronting ourselves with those kind of contradictions, because actually I believe both things that you just said, you know. Mass culture is killing us, mass culture is saving us. I think the highest form of sort of human existence is to be able to have both those things vibrating in your mind and then hold off on action until it's absolutely necessary. That, to me, that's what wisdom is. So for me, writing is to try to contradict myself constantly as sort of energetically as I can in each case, if that makes sense. Yeah, so, I mean, I dodged it a bit, but
no, it's fine.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks for your question.
Thanks. I hope this isn't a tacky question. I forgot to ask Jonathan Lethem when he was here, but winning the Macarthur Award allows for you to have some sort of freedom, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And I know being a short story writer as opposed to a novel writer isn't the way to go if you want to be a best-selling
That's
John
been
Grisham
my
type.
experience.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just curious, imagining that you must have some more sense of freedom now that you have the grant, and so is nonfiction what you had already planned, or is that kind of now that without these constraints, this is what I want to do?
No,
How does that work?
No, this book actually, some of the pieces are as old as '98, so it was just sort of a coincidence that it was basically all done except for one piece when I got the Macarthur, so that's just kind of...
Oh, so if you don't mind, if that's true about the freedom, then what are your plans?
For my wife and I, I'm from a kind of a... well, when we got married, we had no money, basically. And so we kind of just blundered ahead. We had kids, and we were always living check to check. So honestly, and kind of unglamorously, the most exciting thing about it has just been that the ceiling lifted just a little. You know, I still teach at Syracuse, although they were nice enough to put me on half-time, which is great. But really, it's not so much, it's psychological in a way. My daughter she's 17, and she had a beautiful way of saying it. She said, you should think about it not as an award, but as something you should try to live up to, you know. So for me, it's not really anything at this point particularly material except a little more breathing room. And then also, again, embarrassingly, because I'm kind of a neurotic Catholic, but the inner nun in me has been a bit silent. You know, the voice that says, oh, Mr. Schmeiderpants, typing your stories, you know. Suddenly I feel like, yeah, the Macarthur likes me, you know, and it actually, you know, many times a day you're at a crossroads and I find myself erring on the side of boldness, which is actually a real blessing. And apparently my original plan, which is to buy 90 jet skis, it's contractual. You can't do it in the Macarthur. I didn't. No. There's someone back there.
Hi, this is more of a craft question for you.
Sure.
I'm wondering how much of what you write comes out being funny, and how much you really spend revising, and how you kind of resolve those two things, because I imagine you could revise the humor right out of your pieces.
Are you a writer?
My husband is, actually. Okay. You met him yesterday.
Oh, I did? Oh.
We're stalking you.
Okay, good. Well, thank God someone finally is. I've been working all my life, and I never got to stalk you. No, I'm a real fanatic reviser. And I think, I think basically I know for a fact that I revise myself when I'm lucky, if I do it right, from a kind of banality into a kind of sharpness. So often in revision, I'll have 3 versions of the same joke, and I'll cut 2. Or there'll be a little bit too much padding on either side of the joke, and you pop that out. I mean, because I think basically humor is, as I say in the book, is being honest a little quicker than is expected. You know, so we have, we go through life in a sense in a diluted state. You know, you all got up and came to work today, and your mind habitually normalizes the circumstance. What are we doing? We're having a lecture. Where are we? We're at a corporate headquarters. Although not a normal, don't get me wrong, but we're all here having a day, and I'm talking and you're polite listening. But on the other hand, you could say just as honestly, just as objectively, 200 future corpses sat in an auditorium. Earlier that day, at some point, all of them had been standing in their underwear. 200 years hence, all will be moldering in the grave. And in a way, that's kind of funny. It's sort of odd, but it's just as true as the first expression of it. So I think humor is really just a way of sort of saying, taking off a bit of the politeness gloves and saying, let's really talk about our actual situation. But revision, oddly, I think it does help you get to that place. The first draft is always kind of banal and always kind of, which is one of the things I wonder about with blogging and stuff, because the first pass of something, if we said to here, everybody in this room write a description of your first kiss, right? They would mostly be the same, right? I mean, there would be some variations. There'd be a slight Gaussian curve. But basically, my feeling is revision attenuates the Gaussian curve. So the people who are really good are going to get way out ahead of that curve by revising. Because revising is just basically sorting through your own BS and your own falsehood and trying to take it out. And much like in a recording studio, if you got to go over many times and splice, you might get a purer version of the thing. Although sometimes funny things just come out, and revision means leave them alone. Leave that little thing alone because it was good.
I know you've had various career paths over time, and at what point did you turn around and were able to embrace the creative part of your personality that probably kept on popping up over those career paths, and you maybe didn't listen to it or knew you wanted to at some point, or just decided to, beat the inner numb into submission, or
right.
However.
I had a brief. I got into grad school, so for a couple years I had that. But at that point I was so terrified I couldn't really produce much. But then I was an engineer, and I went to work at an environmental engineering company in Rochester, and we had our two kids really quickly, I think on the same day, but they're not twins, so it was weird. It was like morning and night. But it was clear that if I wanted to be a writer, it wasn't going to happen in a writer's colony. It was going to happen at work. So I did what you at Google don't have to do, which is I stole a bunch of time, or maybe you do, I don't know, but I stole a bunch of time from my employer. I had sort of calculated the exact number of steps from the door to my cubicle, and it turned the computer so the person really had to be trying to see the screen. And then this was back in the DOS days, so it was Shift F3 was still the kind of the toggle thing. So I would set it up like that, put a story on one screen and my engineering work on the other. And I actually developed this tick where I'd be writing and I'd be really excited, and as soon as somebody came in, I'd hit Shift F3 and go like that, So all of that, the whole first book was written under those conditions at work. So actually it was kind of great because it wasn't like I got my writer's cabin. It was the opposite. It was, people were trying to catch me. At one point, I got in a story in the New Yorker, and that's when suddenly it was clear that I was doing something at work. And my boss one point said, he said, George, congratulations on your success and all, but we're going to have to insist that you don't use corporate equipment to manufacture your writer thingies. I was like, oh. So we had to bill our time. So if you were going to the bathroom, Kodak was sort of paying for it. So I developed this system where if somebody offended me, which they constantly were, because I'm very touchy, I would take like the George Saunders grant for the arts. So someone would go, George, this cover is completely messed up. Do it again. And I'd say, okay, asshole. You just given me a 3-hour grant for the arts. And I would then, then the next time he came in, he'd say, how long does it take to get this? Because I was the cover guy. That's what I did. And this is such an unsophisticated group that because I knew WordPerfect well enough to center, and I knew how to go down like 9 lines and 3 lines, I was the cover guru. so when I say, next time that asshole said, how many hours do you need? I'd say, for that cover, that's going to be a tough one. Give me 4 hours, or 2 hours or whatever. And when it took 12 minutes. So then I would, work. So anyway, a long way of saying that creative moment didn't really come. It came for 6 years at work in little bits and pieces, which actually was kind of purifying because, if there are writers in the crowd, when you get too much time, what you start doing is researching. Like someone has a cup of hot chocolate and you're like, I wonder what the history of hot chocolate is. I better take a trip to Bolivia and check it out. Whereas in this situation, it was just I wouldn't sit down unless I knew something was urgent, and then I'd sit down, Shift F3, run out again, So it was kind of a different way of working. And after 5 or 6 years of that, the book came out, and then that sort of bigger space opened up. But so I still simulate that now. I kind of like interrupt myself and try to, feel as guilty as possible when I'm working. Anything?
On the Dubai piece, I know you spent some time also talking about the workers that, in essence, these buildings were built on the back of. And I was just wondering if you could address that a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually a defect in the piece because I was only there for a week, and the conditions are really bad for them. But the thing, when you do a piece like this, you're trying to find a thing that hasn't been said before, and you can find the fact that there are these very low-wage workers from South Asia in Dubai. But in talking to them, what was interesting to me was that they actually, to them, the ones I spoke with, their life is much better there, certainly than it was at home, and certainly better than it was in Saudi Arabia. So there was a kind of interesting thing where I was looking for the story I'd gone to find, which is, I'm so oppressed. I hate this place. I didn't find that particular one. I think I could have found it, but I didn't find it. And instead what I found was people who said, yeah, I haven't been home in 3 years, but my mother has a house because I'm here, The truth is these guys, you see them, they work 24-hour days, in shifts, of course, but any time of the day or night, you'll see these mostly, I think, South Indian laborers in blue jumpsuits. So they're in construction sites, and they work, nonstop and get very little money, and they live in these sort of labor camps, which are, I didn't get into one, but they're apparently pretty bad out on the outskirts of town. So that's kind of the secret shame of Dubai, and yet, as I say in the piece, the same people in Saudi Arabia are much worse off. So it's tricky. There's also these crazy sex clubs where you go in and they're beautiful, beautiful nightclubs, $100 to get in, and all the prostitutes are basically arranged by nationality, or they self-arrange by nationality. So near the bathroom is what they call Koreatown, and then there's the Moldavians, and then there's the Thai girls, and it's just really the most futuristic, surreal thing. And of course, a good number of the women are not there voluntarily. They thought they were in for something else and they got shipped there. So I didn't have the time, or actually just the intelligence to be investigative about it. But I tried to give a taste of all that different kind of stuff. So other more serious journalists have gone in and kind of told that story, I think, more than I did.
We actually had Casper Hauser visit a little while ago, the comedy troupe.
Great, yeah.
And they commented, they were asked a question about kind of the state of satire and comedy and how they keep in touch with a sense of community in North America in general, but also just across the board. And maybe you could comment a bit. I know writing is a pretty lonely profession, and if you establish a community, if it's specific to kind of satire in that area, or if you also just try to actively connect with different folks across the board.
Really, I'm not a recluse, but I'm kind of a lazy ass, and I just basically sit around my house most times. I have friends like Dave Eggers is a friend, and David Foster Wallace is a friend, and Jonathan Franz, and a lot of people, but we kind of communicate occasionally and not so, when I was younger, I always imagined we'd all be hanging around in a coffee shop, but I don't really have that kind of community. I've got, my wife and kids in a sort of little neighborhood, and so I don't really, have it, actually, to be honest with you. And maybe it's a defect, but I tend to just spend 9 or 10 hours in my study just waiting for something to happen, and then occasional little bursts of trips like out to New York or something. And then the nice thing is I do know, because of the being published, I get to meet a lot of people really quickly. Like I met Sarah Vowell the other day, and that was really like an incredible conversation, just like a 15-minute burst of sheer, intelligence and wit. So that's the community is sort of, it's almost like it's a little bit like an online community in that it's occasional and it's sort of rarefied, and then you feed on it for many months afterwards. So, yeah. Well, can I close with one more? Would you indulge me with one little three-page piece that I'd like to leave with? And this one, I always kind of cringe to read it because I like it, but it's a little bit tough. So I apologize if it's offensive, but but also it's supposed to be. This is called Manifesto, a press release from PRKA. Now it can be told. Last Thursday, my organization, People Reluctant to Kill for an Abstraction, PRKA, orchestrated an overwhelming show of force around the globe. At precisely 9 in the morning, working with focus and stealth, our entire membership succeeded in simultaneously beheading no one. At 9:30, we embarked upon Phase 2, during which our entire membership simultaneously did not force a single man to simulate sex with another man. At 10, Phase 3 began, during which not a single one of us blew himself or herself up in a crowded public place. No civilians were literally turned inside out via our powerful explosives. No previously funny person was reduced to a baggy pile of bloody, leaking flesh by us during this phase of our operation. In addition, at 11, in Phase 4, zero planes were flown into buildings. All of this was accomplished so surreptitiously it attracted little public notice. During Phase 5, just after lunch, while continuing to avoid the activities listed above, we were able to avoid bulldozing a single home. Furthermore, we set on roads in every city, in every nation in the world, a total of zero roadside bombs, which, not being there, did not explode, killing, maiming a total of nobody. No bombs, cluster bombs, or rockets were launched into crowded civilian neighborhoods, from which it was observed no post-bomb sickening momentary silences could be heard. These silences were in all cases followed by no unimaginable grief-stricken bellows of rage and loss. No sleeping babies were awakened from sleep by the sudden collapse and or bursting into flame of his or her domicile, followed by the tortured screams of his or her family members during Phase 5. In the early afternoon, Phase 6, our membership focused on using zero trained dogs to bite, terrorize naked prisoners. In addition, no stun guns, rubber batons, rubber bullets, tear gas, or real bullets were used by our membership on any individual anywhere in the world. No one was forced to don a hood. No teeth were pulled in darkened rooms. Drills were not used on human flesh, nor were whips or flames. No one was reduced to hysterical tears via a series of blows to the head or body by us. Our membership, while casting no racial or ethnic aspersions, skillfully continued not to rape, gang rape, or sexually assault a single person. On the contrary, during this afternoon phase, many of our membership engaged in tender, loving sexual acts, flirted happily, and even consoled, in a non-sexual way, individuals to whom they were attracted, putting aside their sexual feelings out of a sudden welling of empathy. As night fell, our membership harbored no secret feelings of rage or hatred, or, if they did, prayed, meditated, or discussed these feelings with a friend, until such time as the feelings abated or were understood to be symptomatic of some deeper sadness, at which time they made silent promises to continue to struggle with these feelings. It should be noted that, in addition to the above listed and planned activities completed by our members, a number of unplanned activities were completed by part-time members or even non-members. In Chitral, Pakistan, for example, a new al-Qaeda recruit remembered an elderly American woman who'd once made him laugh with a snide remark about an ugly lampshade, and the way that, as she made the remark, she touched his arm like a mother. In Gaza, an Israeli soldier and a young Palestinian exchanged a brief look of mutual shame. In London, a bitter homophobic grandfather, whose grocery bag broke open, gave a loaf of nice bread to a balding gay man who stopped to help him. A stooped, toothless woman in Tokyo pounded her head with her hands, tired beyond belief of her lifelong feelings of anger and negativity, and silently prayed that her heart would somehow, miraculously, be opened before it was too late. In Syracuse, New York, holding the broken body of his kitten, a man wept. Who are we? A word about our membership. Since the world began, we've gone about our work quietly, resisting the urge to generalize, insisting upon valuing the individual over the group, the actual over the conceptual, the inherent sweetness of a peaceful moment over the theoretically peaceful future supposedly to be obtained via murder or massacre. Many of us have trouble sleeping and lie awake at night worrying about something catastrophic befalling someone we love. We rise in the morning with no plans to convert anyone via beating, humiliation, murder, or invasion. To tell the truth, we are tired. We work. We would just like some peace and quiet. When wrong, we think about it a while, then apologize. We stand on our awnings during urban thunderstorms, moved to thoughtfulness by the beautiful, troubled, umbrella-tinged faces rushing by. In moments of crisis, we pat one another awkwardly on the back, mumbling shy truisms. Rushing to an appointment, remembering a friend who has passed away, our eyes well with tears, and we think, well, my God, I was lucky just to have known him. This is us. This is who we are. This is PRKA. To those who would oppose us, I would simply say, we are many. We are worldwide. We, in fact, outnumber you. Though you are louder, though you create a momentary ripple on the water of life, we will endure and prevail. Join us. Resistance is futile. Thank you very much. Thank you.